that can't be with us, please know that this session will be recorded and available on our website. All right, and I'll keep an eye on, oh, yep, hang on, more people joining. I'll keep an eye on that participant list too, in the waiting room. Well, good, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this very, very cold day. As we talked about already, it's warming up, so that's great news. I'm Angie Pilgrim. I'm the Director of Community Impact for the St. Croix Valley Foundation. And just a huge thank you to everyone that joined us today for taking the time to learn more, and for this specific CIS Consultants and Service on the Screen presentation. This is the second in a series of 4 Lunch and Learn professional development opportunities. There's another one in April and then in June. So you'll be hearing more about those from me via email. So today we will be hearing from Miriam Simmons, who you've met, and we'll hear from her on how to run an effective board meeting. So first of all, a few Zoom logistics. I'm sure you're all getting pretty comfortable with Zoom, but before we get started, I am going to mute everyone. So I just did that just in case, so there's no snafus. Also, Miriam has a lot to review today, so if you have any questions, just type them into that chat box. And if we're unable to get to them in this session, I will definitely get back to you via email. And like I said, this session is being recorded and we'll make it available via our website. So before I turn it over to Miriam, just a very quick overview of the St. Croix Valley Foundation. We are a regional community foundation. We were founded in 1995 to enhance the quality of life in the St. Croix Valley. We support 10 completely volunteer-run affiliated foundations. Some of them are here today. Those are located in 6 counties throughout the St. Croix Valley, including Chisago and Washington counties in Minnesota, and Burnett, Polk, St. Croix, and Pierce counties in Wisconsin. So one of the things we do to enhance the quality of life of the Valley is to support our area nonprofits. And we do that through both grant making and grant dollars, as well as professional development, which is why we're all here today. So along those lines, back in 2017, we launched what we call the Consultants and Service Program. And the idea of the program is to help our small nonprofits, so those with an operating budget of $500,000 or less, by matching their needs with experts who volunteer their time. So those consultants do everything from strategic planning to board development. We've helped with executive director searches, and anyone interested completes a very straightforward application process. And another shoot off of that program is CIS on the Road. And that's where our consultants present very popular topics, things that we keep hearing from nonprofits that they need to learn more about, to a group of gathered nonprofit leaders. And because we're currently not meeting in person, we're doing that programming on the screen. So if you are interested in learning more about consultants and service, and you think you have an area of development that you'd benefit from, please reach out to me via email. So now, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce our speaker today, our presenter, Miriam Simmons. Miriam is the past chair of one of our 10 affiliates, the Stillwater Area Community Foundation, and she is the current secretary of the League of Women Voters in Minnesota, and obviously a professional registered parliamentarian. So thank you so much, Miriam, for being here today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And I really, on behalf of the whole community, I thank you all for caring enough about your organization to want things to maybe run a little more smoothly. And because usually or often when I say I'm a parliamentarian, people literally back up. I promise you, this is not going to be scary. You're going to be less scared at the end of this, because we're going to try to understand some basics. Okay, and again, let me get my thing on the screen here. And we'll just go ahead and get this. I was going to say too, if I were in your shoes, I'd probably be eating lunch about now. So I totally understand that some of you blacked out your screens. That's great. But those of you who are willing to stay on camera would be lovely, because it's nice to see a few faces once in a while. Also, we're going to try to, and to that end, I take me off the screen and I can see a few of you. So thank you for that. We're going to use, as Angie said, the chat feature. If you have a question, or if I just blow by something and you're like, what? Please use the chat feature. We're also going to use a poll, and I may use a few reactions. There's those buttons down at the bottom of your screen where you can select a reaction, like a yes or a no is all I'm looking for. We'll see how that works. Sometimes it doesn't work so well. And there is a handout. Okay. And what will happen is that at the very end, Angie will load a short PDF file into the chat box, and you can download that to your computer. Now, that being said, we found out last week when I did this that some computers have a security feature and they won't let you do that. So in which case, would you let us know, and then we will get the handout to you. It's some hopefully helpful hints for you, something that will help. Okay. All right. So what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about board meetings, because we do not want bad meetings. And I need to get this out of the way. This is the scary part, that everybody gets scared, but it's not scary. Here's the thing. If you want to get some confidence about how to run a meeting, get this little book called Robert's Rules of Order in Brief. It's only $7.50, and you can order it from wherever you order books. You do not need the full rule book, which I have here. Somebody like me needs the full rule book. And here's the other thing. We sent some questions out to folks, and many of you got back to Angie with your answers to some questions. And one of the questions was, has anybody been to a convention? The reason I was asking that question, most of you have not. The reason I was asking that question is because if you do not know parliamentary procedure, when you go to a convention, your chances of standing up and saying something like making a motion or speaking to a motion, your chances are really between slim and none, because you don't know what's going on. So that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of situation where you have to have rules. Because when there's just a few of us, especially when there's like two of us, you don't need a rule book to have a conversation with somebody and to make a decision. But when you're in a bigger meeting, and frankly, anywhere between two people and a bigger meeting, you need to have rules. So the first thing you do at a convention is you adopt rules. And what should have preceded that, if you're going to be active in a convention, is you would know what those rules are. Okay, so I could go all parliamentarian on you. I love telling people, my clients are like, I have to do this. I'm like, no, I'm not going to go all parliamentarian on you. Make sure things are clear and make sure things are fair and things are going to work out. Okay. So for you, for gaining more confidence, even in small board, and maybe in particularly in a small board meeting, get Robert's Rules of Order in Brief. That's my only, if we were in person, I'd be handing some of these out. They'd be door prizes. How cool is that? Along with chocolate, which is a necessary condition of any meeting, in my opinion. Okay, we're going to talk today mostly about small boards, but /and. I have to make some comments about small boards that are generalizations. And when I say something like you always do such and so, there's always going to be an exception, okay? But I'm going to give you your default mode of doing things in a board. Why are we talking about small boards? Because most of you are on small boards. What is a small board? It's 12 people or fewer. Why is that? It's just how groups operate. And what does it really mean? It means you're less strict with the rules in a small board. They're actually the same rules that you use at a convention. Okay, because what's the big deal about a convention? You have to be fair, it has to be clear, you have to know what's going on. But I can relax those rules. Also, as you all know, in a small board, you often segue into, or even if you're in a large board. So the largest board anybody told me they were on was about a 20-person board. And you know, and I know what happens on any board. You sort of slide into committee work. It's very annoying on a big board because it takes a long time. You got everybody sitting there and they're all trying to do committee work. It just is not efficient and it takes forever to get through a meeting. In a small board, because it is small, you end up sliding into committee work and then you kind of slide back out and then you slide back in again. And it's just how small boards work. It's actually perfectly fine, but you need to be aware of some things to not have that drive people crazy and to get through the business you need to get through. I wish I had $1 for every time somebody said to me, could you just tell me the rules? If you'll just tell me the rules, I'll do it. I'm like, okay, so folks, here are the rules. There are 3 easy rules to remember. 1, someone is in charge. 2, we're going to come back to this picture. You follow the agenda. And 3, you start and end on time, as far as practical. Sometimes in a snowstorm, it's very hard to start on time. I'm going to concede that point. But for the sake of everybody in the room, as close as possible, start on time. The biggest one here, right here, we're going to talk about this and show an example in a minute of someone in charge. If you are the chair of a board, they expect you to be in charge, for one thing, and expect you to know what you're doing. They do not expect you to be the master and commander, because you're not. You're much more like a traffic cop and much less like the master and commander. So when you're on a small board or even a larger board, a 20-person board, where are you? You're sitting at a head of a table. Why? Because you can see everybody. You need to see everybody. Secretary's next to you. Why? Because you need to ask him or her a question. And you just are trying to get the people in this room to come to a decision about something. You are not trying to force them to come to the decision you want. That is not your job as chair. Okay? So someone's in charge, someone's directing traffic, right? You follow the agenda, start and end on time. Now, I am going to take you to the hopefully last bad meeting you are ever going to be at. And why? Because if you're a presider, you're going to fix some things and not have a bad meeting again. And if you're a member, you're going to have some things you can do to help it not be a bad meeting. So even if you're crunching on your lunch, I would ask you to please listen to this meeting. This is from an actual real meeting. It's a transcript of a meeting. So you're going to hear me and my very good sport husband trying to reproduce a meeting in which there were about 25 people. Okay, so please, if you would listen, and we're going to ask some questions. Okay, I call this meeting to order. You should have the agenda. We mailed the agenda. I need a motion to approve the agenda. Can somebody make a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move.
Okay, so is there a second? I need a second. Is there any second?
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, thank you. Now, the annual minutes of our last meeting were in your packet, and that was in the mail, so you shouldn't have to read it. We don't need to read them. Can I get a motion to accept them? Yes, a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, do we have a second? I need to get a second.
Second.
Okay, now I need a vote. Can I get a vote to approve the minutes?
I have a question on the minutes.
Well, what's that?
I read an election that happened at that meeting, but today I recognize he is not sitting on the board.
Yes, well, there's been this thing that happened. I'm fine with it that we can talk about it, but can we just get this done first and then we'll talk about it?
Your choice.
Well, okay, as soon as we get this done with this motion, then we can talk about it.
This is the discussion part of the motion?
Oh, well, we don't have discussion because it should be cut and dry. Aren't you in the middle of a motion? Yes, we have a motion and a second. So I want to take the vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Aye. Okay, so it's not approved. Okay.
Sorry,
I call this meeting to order.
sorry, half the time this does this on me. Okay. Little audio glitch there. Here's my point to this meeting. It was a lot worse than this because it actually took them, the meeting was called to order at time 0. The agenda, it took 7 minutes to get an approval of the agenda. It took 8 minutes and 15 seconds to get a motion to approve the minutes. And it took 10 minutes and 43 seconds to accomplish absolutely nothing. Okay, so I have a couple of questions for you guys. First, this is true, false, and actually you can, if we could fill it in the participant box, it'd be great. But just, I want to see what you think about this. You must start a meeting by asking for a motion to approve the agenda. True or false? Okay, and if you can put up an icon that's one of the reactions that says yes, or put up a hand or something like that. If it's okay. Okay. You must ask for a motion to approve the minutes. True or false? Okay. We're going to come back to this. Both of these are false. They're way false. I want you to remember that they're false because this is how a chair loses control of a meeting within 1 minute of the start of a meeting. Okay. And I'm going to emphasize this in this way. Okay. I'm going to hold up the big book. For those of you who can see me, this is the big book. Nowhere in this book does it say you must approve an agenda. That is not a rule in this book. Here's what it says. It says, if you approve an agenda, the only way you can change it is by a 2/3 vote. That's what the rule is. There's no rule to approve it. And the motion to approve the minutes is the asking the wrong thing entirely. I don't know even what that means. The motion is, in fact, worded like this. Are there any corrections to the minutes? You're not interested in the opinion of your board member as to the paper the minutes are printed on, or whatever the secretary, how she wrote he or she wrote something down. You're interested in whether or not they're correct. All right, let's ask a couple questions about this particular meeting. So Angie's going to put up a poll for me. And I've got it on also the questions on the screen so that you can, so that when it's recorded, people can see the questions. Knowing what you guys know about people, because people are people everywhere, as my uncle used to say, do you think this meeting got better from this point forward? Yes or no? So fill in the poll. Did the meeting improve from this point forward? The second question, a member asked, I'm going to let you guys fill that in while we go to the next one. Okay. Did the meeting improve? Yes or no? And second question, a member asked a question about the minutes. Somebody's saying, I have a question, this thing happened, right? And the chair says, well, we're not going to talk about it. Was a question about the minutes out of order? In other words, was he not supposed to ask a question about the minutes? Okay. A lot of people eating lunch here and they're not clicking. They're not clicking. All right. The chair asked people to vote at the very end of the clip, the audio clip. The chair asks people to vote. Now, there is a rule about asking people to vote that I would ask you all to enforce, and it would help things a lot. But anyway, was it clear what she was asking? So there's 25 people in the room, and she says, I need to take a vote. Those in favor, and some people say aye, and those opposed, and a whole bunch of people say aye. So was that clear? Okay. All right. Okay, let's look at the questions. Do you think the meeting improved? No, it did not. It got a whole lot worse. And it went for 3.5 hours. And the only reason they adjourned is because everybody was yelling at each other as they left the room. There was never a mention of adjournment. It just disintegrated. Was the member asking about minutes? Was this out of order? Definitely not. Anytime you have the minutes, and if a member has a question about the minutes, you need to answer the question about the minutes. Then the chair asked people to vote. It was absolutely not clear and contrary to Robert's rules. So I am going to throw this rule at you because it's a rule. When you ask for a vote, you say those in favor say aye, those opposed say no. Why do you do that? So that it's clear. Okay, Angie, we can stop. I'll let you go ahead and stop sharing. And did you share? I'm sorry, did you share results? Okay, we can, if you've shared results, we can stop sharing. Okay. Okay. Now, so here's rule, we're back to rule number 1, the chair is in charge. In that audio clip, was the chair in charge? No, she was never in charge. Here's your job as a chair. Lots of you have said you are a chair, have been a chair, or are going to be a chair, which is, if you're involved long enough in a nonprofit, you're going to be the chair at some point. All right, what's your job? You got 2 things you got to do. 1, treat everybody equitably. And I can't tell you what equity is, you just know it, or you certainly know inequity when you see it, okay? The second thing you have to do is you have to be clear. Your actions have to be clear. Taking a vote, making a motion, whatever it is, it has to be clear. That's your job as chair. Okay. Now, all of us have been board members. You get a board orientation quite often, and you're told you've got fiscal responsibilities, which you certainly do. All of us know that. You have duty of care of the organization. You're supposed to keep the organization alive. That's absolutely true. And all of you, I am sure, are aware of that and good shepherds of your organization. But you also have rights. And there's 3 fundamental rights of a member of any organization. One's to participate. One is, which means you're going to know what's going on. And it also can mean that you ask that the rules be followed. Because when they're not followed, it leads to trouble. We're going to try to avoid trouble. So all members have rights. Participate, to request limits on some rights. Why do I want to do that? Because I maybe really don't want to have Joe sitting in the corner talk for 15 minutes straight on one thing when we have 14 items on the agenda. Okay? And you have a right to be nominated for office. I'll get to that toward the end, and this sounds like kind of out there because this only happens once or twice a year, but it keeps going wrong. And and it causes problems. Okay, and I'm jiggling with I've got to stop touching my cursor here. Okay, the right to participate, every member, you can make motions, you can debate, and you can vote. Every member, every organization, no matter what organization you're in. And that, of course, that is correct for a board. Okay, so I'm not going to be late. There's a lot we could go into on this in terms of bigger meetings, but we're not going to do this for a small board. It's pretty straightforward for a small board or even for a board of 20. Okay, you have a right to know what's going on. What am I talking about? You always have a right to read the minutes. Minutes aren't secret. You have a right to make corrections to the minutes. You have a right to know what the motion is. I normally, and I not too long ago did not say this kind of thing, but I've been in too many meetings where nobody knew what the motion was. So it seems like it ought to be self-evident, but it can be a problem. Another thing that needs to happen is it's a basic rule. It's a basic thing of fairness and of making things are clear. You discuss one motion at a time. Sorry, one motion at a time. And why is that? In other words, you may make a motion and have all kinds of motions applied to it. We all know this, right? And make a motion. It could be amended. It could be postponed till later. It could be, that can happen, but I'm discussing one subject matter at a time. So for example, I want to talk for a minute here about small boards versus large boards, because this is where a lot of confusion comes in. In a small board, so there's 7 of you, let's say, and you pile into the room and you've agreed on the agenda, or at least not changed the agenda. You've approved, you've said the minutes are okay. And now the problem, the issue on everybody's mind is we need to buy a computer and we need to buy it soon. So in a small board, what happens is you're all talking about this, everybody, the chair, all the members, everybody. Nobody actually says, I move to, because you're just talking about it. And eventually you get to a motion everybody seems happy with. In a large board, what would happen? Well, first of all, if you have 20 people, you've got enough people to form a committee. So hopefully at some meeting or another, or by call of the president, somebody got that row is pinned on them and they said, the president would have said, would you guys please go and figure out a recommendation so that we can buy a computer, and then present the recommendation to the board, right? Because that's what committees do. They recommend things to the board and the board votes on them. All right, so all that said and done, you're not ever going to see a motion like, hey, let's buy a computer. You're going to see a motion more like this. Up to $1,250 from a certain fund to buy a certain computer, and we need a printer or some cables or this, that, and the other, and we need to buy it by May 1st. If you're on a small board, you all kind of came to that together, and nobody ever has to say, and nobody ever did say, I move to spend up to, it just came together. And in your minutes, it will say, we voted on the following motion to spend up to $1,250 from the operating fund. In a large board, especially if the committee is really good, they stood up, well, if they stood up, which is a whole nother story. You don't have to stand up, but it's nice to stand up. So somebody raises their hand or stands up, they get recognized and they say, Madam Chair, on behalf of the committee, I move to spend $1,250 from the operating fund on this computer. Off you go. You have a little bit of discussion. It's a large board. The committee did a great job. They all vote aye. Nobody votes no. Off you go. Okay. And in the minutes you put down, it was moved and seconded. I beg your pardon. It was moved from the committee to buy this computer. It comes from a committee, so it doesn't need a second. While I'm on that topic, what's the purpose of a second? The only purpose of a second is that somebody other than one person wants to discuss a motion. That's the only purpose of a second. And this doesn't, and usually you're all talking about it, or you're all talking about it already. So sometimes you don't need a second at all because you're already all talking about it. In a big meeting, there's actually a famous story of a chair asking repeatedly for a second, which is like rule number one in what chairs do not do. Do not ask for a second. If nobody else wants to discuss it, the subject is dead and you move on. So you would never see that at a big meeting. No second, no discussion. You have a right to ask that the rules be followed. So what I haven't told you yet is how I end up learning of some really great stories. Like that audio clip I played for you from a 3.5-hour meeting. Think of a parliamentarian like you'd think of your plumber. The plumber got called because something got backed up and there is one heck of a mess on the floor. That's about the time I got called into this group with the 3.5-hour meeting. Was not a good deal. And why? Part of the deal was people were not making sure the rules got followed. In a small board or even in a large board, maybe even especially in a large board, 20 people, you got side conversations, you got stuff going on, you got people trying to do committee work when they shouldn't. Anybody should ask to return to the agenda. Sometimes the chair is the offending person, right? The chair has gone off on some tangent and you should raise your hand. Hey, you got to get home, you got stuff to do, or you're sick of looking at a Zoom screen. Madam Chair, could we please return to the agenda? What you don't need to know for a small board, there's actually an official motion, it's a privileged motion called call for the orders of the day. Do you really need to know that at this? No, just ask to return to the agenda. You don't have to go all official or all official sounding. Just get back to where you need to be. So that there are other rules the chair is supposed to follow, and organizations have problems when the chair does not. For example, they just decide they don't want to follow the bylaws or they don't want to do a certain thing. Okay, you can call the chair to order. Any member can do that. It's important that for most of the things you do, the majority decides. And again, there are exceptions, but that's your default. The majority decides, okay? Why, I used to not put this in. First, what's majority? Majority is more than half. What's half? Okay, if I have 7 people in the room, half is 3.5. More than half is 4. A 4-3 vote prevails. That's all it means. Majority, more than half. It's easier if you just remember that. Also, it means nobody has veto power. I have seen this in a couple of boards where the chair just didn't like something after a vote and said, I don't want to do that. After a vote, chair can't do that. And the other thing I've seen is trying to force people to vote. You cannot take away, or you should not take away, somebody's right to abstain. Maybe I don't know enough. Maybe I just don't care. Maybe I have a conflict of interest or a potential conflict of interest and should not vote. People have a right to abstain. So let's make sure we understand. If I have a majority, more than half, I mean a majority of those who voted, a majority present and voting. So if on a 7-person board, if 1 person abstains, I need a 4-2 vote, because 3-3 means nothing, right? More than half. It's definitely more than half. All right. The other big problem in boards, and the bigger the board, I was going to say maybe not, sometimes not. Sometimes it doesn't matter what size of the board. How do you get them to stop talking? Please stop talking so we can go home or go get my glass of wine or go eat lunch or whatever it is. Just stop talking. Okay. You have a right as a member to request limits on some rights. You could set, one of the smartest things you can do in a big meeting where you have, in other words, a lot of people, a 20-person, I have a friend who does a 45-person board. So it means the agenda is huge and you're not going to sit there for 6 hours. You're just not. You're going to have to get this done. So the smart thing to do is at the beginning of the meeting, set a limit of how long you're going to discuss something. And have everybody agree. They all agree to it. So you're limiting your rights, but you agree to it. Because one of your rights is to discuss this like forever, but honestly, who wants to do that? Nobody. So set a limit on how long you want to. The chair can do this, can say at the beginning, okay, would it be acceptable, everybody, to just discuss such and so for 15 minutes and then we're done, because we got to move on. The other thing you can do is you can set time limits on speaking. Now, we usually don't do that on a small board because it just would seem weird and you need a timekeeper. In other words, literally, you got 2 minutes to say what you need to say, or 1 minute. It does focus one's thought if one has to come up with an intelligent comment in 60 seconds instead of what seems like forever. So in small boards, usually, again, that's not a problem. And there are small board rules, which are in the handout at the end. You're going to see that. So because it gives you some more latitude. But generally, you want to set time limits. In a large board, nobody should speak more than twice on any one motion. That's a rule that you should follow because it starts to feel really unfair when somebody keeps talking. Okay. You have a right to ask for the debate to end. This is a motion. And in a big assembly, like a big convention, it would be called, I move the previous question or I call the question. So some of you may have heard that. In a small board, all you need to say, or all the chair needs to say is, okay, really, we've heard all these arguments. Are we not ready for a vote? You don't need to make a formal motion. Just, aren't we ready? We've been there. We've spent a lot of time. Let's move on and take the vote. The chair should not be shy about doing this, but you should be very keenly aware that did people speak? Did people get a chance to speak? Are you neglecting somebody who's reluctant to speak for some reason? You just need to be aware of that. You have okay, here I am back to being nominated for office. Why am I throwing this out at you? When I originally wrote this slide up, I put down a right to be elected. No, you don't, because people may not vote for you because they don't like you or they don't want you in this office, but you do have a right to be nominated and you have a right to nominate yourself. Twice I have walked into a meeting somewhere and somebody handed me a piece of paper and they said, here, you need to fill this out because this is we're voting. And I'm like, and I'm looking at this going, this is not even an election. You just handed me a piece of paper and told me who to vote for. It's not an election. It's anti-democratic. And I'm going to emphasize that by showing a picture of Kim Jong-un, nice guy, head of North Korea. And in North Korea, the way it works is this. A person is given a slip of paper with his name on it and something to check off next to it. And they check it off and they put it in a box, or else. That is not democratic. It is not voting. It is not a choice. It's don't do it. So your default is, even when you're on a small board and even though you're all rotating amongst positions, when you take nominations, you always ask for more nomination. Are there any nominations from the floor? You always ask that. And on a ballot, which you should do your elections by a ballot, even on a small board. Why? Because someday down the line, you're going to have a problem. I promise you, you're going to have a problem. So set the standard now to not have that problem. Make it a ballot, and by each, so let's say you have your officers, each way you have a blank for somebody to write in a name so that you've given them a choice. That's actually is one of the rules in Roberts. It's one of the few times in Roberts rules it says you must do something, and it's that you must take nominations from the floor. Okay, let's go back to our meeting. Best practices before the meeting. So here's what, to be honest, one of the favorite things I complain about is people not being prepared for a meeting. It's not like it's a surprise. You know you're having a meeting. You should be ready for this meeting, particularly if you're the chair. So what happens beforehand? I would not be a parliamentarian if I didn't mention bylaws. Mostly what I mean is have them with you. The chair should always have a copy with him or her. The secretary should always have a copy at the meeting. All your board members should, of course, know that there are bylaws. They should have read them once. And you refer to them. If they're not working for you, fix them, amend them. Review the minutes. What do I mean by that? I'm a secretary. I've been secretary loads of times, many organizations. I would never send out minutes to the board unless those minutes have been reviewed by the president and maybe one other person. And maybe I've made a call to a committee chair and said, is that what you said, or is this what you said? I don't, is it clear what I'm saying in the minutes? Why? Because you get to your meeting, and instead of getting to your meeting, you're diddling around trying to get the minutes fixed. I have a nightmare of a story on that one. It was 35 minutes to correct the minutes. 35 minutes. I never went back. I swore I wouldn't go back. And part of the problem was that we couldn't find where, nobody could agree on where it was we were correcting because there were no line numbers. It's a simple thing. Put line numbers on the document. It's a one-click deal in Word. And then you just, boom, you go to that line. There's a question I'm not trying to explain to somebody. It's the third paragraph, second sentence. Well, okay, right? Review the minutes before you send them out. And of course, all of you all do this, but I mean, I know you do. You send out the agenda in advance and you send minutes out in advance, so you're good. We're going to go back to a meeting. So if you're crunching on something still, I'd like some, but listen to this meeting and let's see if you can tell any differences.
Greetings all at 7 p.m. This meeting is called to order. You received an agenda last week and more copies are available. Please observe that a few things are moved around on the agenda as the Vice President has to leave early. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we will proceed with the agenda as distributed. Also in your packets were the minutes of our last meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Can you hold your comments? We just need to get these done.
But point of order, Mr. Chair, a question regarding the minutes should be answered when we are looking at the minutes.
Quite correct. Your point is well taken. Proceed.
At line 36, it says that Joe Smith was retained as a consultant. I thought his name was Bob.
His name is definitely Joe.
Well, then I've just got to stop calling him Bob.
Okay. Are there any corrections to the minutes? All right. Seeing none, the minutes stand approved as distributed. All right. The chair understands that there is a motion regarding a computer purchase.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Greetings all at 7 p.m.
Sorry, again, I'm having issues when, sorry, I'm stealing my thunder. 1 minute, and by point of doing that now, okay, that was scripted and I scripted it and I'm the problem member, and although it wasn't really a problem, and my husband's being a good sport again. But my point of this is that we got through the agenda, which did not need to be approved, especially for the smaller the meeting, the less it needs to be approved. You just simply have an agenda. Are we going to go with it? Let's go with it. So in 1 minute and 15 seconds, we got through everything, and now we're to a motion, which we knew, the chair knew was coming, which is another thing. If honestly, if you don't communicate well with your board, this is a problem. But I mean, if you're the chair, they shouldn't be springing something on you in the meeting. You should know a motion is coming. So you would know that. Or let's say you're the chair and you know a motion needs to be made, assign someone the motion. Don't hope they're going to make, this is Minnesota. People are not going to, they do not come forward. They're going to sit there shyly in the back. They are just not going to do it. So assign them the motion, say, please, could you make this motion? And it's worded correctly. And you have the secretary knows what it is. And you make the person who makes the motion, make them get somebody to say second. And then you're on your way and you're getting your business done. Okay. All right. Best practices during the meeting. Use unanimous consent. And by the way, that doesn't mean everybody really agrees. It's just they didn't object. Okay. Is the agenda okay? Yes, nobody objects. Are there any objections to changing this item on the agenda? Nobody ever objects. Why would they object? This way, if you formally adopt the agenda and you want to follow the rules, because you're a rule person, if you formally adopt the agenda, then you have to formally change it. So don't go through all that. For the minutes, you want to ask the correct question. In our very bad meeting at the beginning, okay, it was in trouble from the beginning, but part of that was really wrong was she didn't say, are there any corrections to the minutes? And she didn't want them discussed at all because they had a problem on the board and had someone leave and they just didn't want to discuss it. Well, which is too bad because it's not secret and they need to tell the membership what's going on. For adjournment, you do not need a motion. Simply, you're done, right? The chair should say, is there any other business? Seeing none, this meeting stands adjourned. That's all you need. Don't go through all this rigmarole. It just takes up a lot of time, and it just takes up time. So why do that? Get motions ready in advance. One of my favorite things to complain about that people don't do. Set time limits on discussion, especially if you have a problem member. And maybe even if you have a problem chair, it's a way to work around the chair a little bit. Set time limits so that you can get out of there. Here's always my goal as a secretary, and we have a lot going on. This is League of Women Voters, for example. There's a lot going on. My goal always is to have 2 pages of minutes. That's it. And to urge the president to start and end on time. That's my whole goal. Okay. It is hard to write concise minutes. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. It's hard. The shorter they are, the harder they are. It's easy just to kind of spit everything back up without editing. Okay. So thank your secretary often and profusely. Okay. I'd like to see if there's any questions because we're going to have a little bit of time here. I don't want to keep you guys past. I put up some potential problems and let's see if we have any questions, Angie.
Yes, we had one from Krista Walsh saying she thought the chair had to call for discussion.
So, okay. So what you would normally do is, okay, yes. So on a small board, you'd all be talking about it anyway. On a large board, so the chair the committee has just said, I move to purchase a computer. And the chair says, okay, terrific. It is moved by the committee to purchase a computer. Is there any discussion? Yes, that's what you're supposed to say.
Okay.
Correct. You're absolutely correct. You always have a discussion because that's a fundamental right to discuss that motion.
So can you clarify for me, Miriam, the difference between calling for discussion? Let's say someone says second, which you said that's when the discussion then happens, is because someone has said second. Mm-hmm. Can you clarify that for me?
I'm actually going to take a look at the chat box here too. Okay, so in a big meeting, you would be standing up at a microphone and you would say, I move to purchase a computer, and somebody says second, and the chair would then say, you may speak to your motion. Because the person who made the motion has the right to speak first. Why? Because they made this motion, they need to explain why they made the motion. Typically in a board, even a large board, you've already had some prefatory remarks. You've already explained why you're coming up with this. Then you make the motion, and the maker of the motion's probably already said all they're going to say, right? Mm-hmm. So again, it's relaxing those rules a little bit. I'm hoping that's clear. Because yes, you do want discussion, and it depends on each circumstance as to exactly how you handle that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else? So.
Okay. Did you see this question? One come up? Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, I can see this one. There's a question about speaking twice on the same subject. In a small board, there's no such limitation. In a large board, there should be, right? Because otherwise you just keep going. I mean, picture 22 people either on screen or in a room, and it's like, you say something in support of a motion or against a motion, and you're supposed to all take turns. So when nobody else has anything to say, you can speak one more time on a motion. If you were at a big convention, somebody's actually keeping track of when you spoke. And if you try to stand up a second time, in fact, usually you don't get a second chance because everybody hasn't spoken once. Everybody who's wanted to hasn't spoken once. So again, let me clarify. In a small board, you're working under the rules. You're working under very informal rules. This is right out of Robert's rules. In a small board, and it's on the handout, there's no limit to the number of times you can speak on a motion. Okay. Anything else? Does nobody have a problem chair? They're just not bringing it up. Or a problem member?
I have to say, Miriam, I'm super surprised about I know on my committee, we approve the agenda and we approve the minutes every time. And we second and yeah, we have some changes to make. Does anyone else do it all wrong?
And it's not everybody, you know, it's not like, I mean, if it really gives you a huge amount of comfort somehow to approve the agenda and make Madam Chair, but honestly, if you've heard as many meetings as I have, where what we didn't really reflect in that first audio was that she had to wring out of the assembly a motion to approve the agenda. It was wrung out of them. And it was a lot worse than what we depicted in the getting a motion to approve the minutes. It was a whole lot worse. Why? Well, part of the reason was everybody was mad at everybody. But to me, it's clear if you ask the right question, and it's just creating work. So an agenda, okay, however, let's go back to a convention real quick. One of the first things you're going to do at a convention is approve an agenda. It's a vote. It might be a standing vote. Okay. Why at a convention? Because you got 1,000 people and they want to know when the election is, because they came just for the election, or they want to know when the budget discussion is, and you stick to that agenda. It's very hard to change an agenda at a big meeting like that. So you adopt it and you stick with it, and then you adopt rules and you stick with them. So. Okay. No, point of order. Is everybody clear on point of order? Probably not. So mostly you don't see this in small meetings, although you ought to more often. Like point of order, Madam Chair, the bylaws say such and so, or the rule is that we should take a 2/3 vote, or this is assuming that you know the rules, of course, or point of order. This feels very unfair. I don't know the rule, but this feels wrong. To me, that's a perfectly valid point of order on a small board. Don't be afraid to do that if something feels wrong, because it's going to go bad it's going to go bad. Okay. Would you ever ask for a second? Somebody says, I don't. I just refuse to ask for. Okay, so I had this happen one time at a board meeting. We were talking about something. It was a little bit contentious. It was there were only 9 of us, I think. It was a little contentious. And we had decided on something. And then somebody said, well, I move that we should do this and this and this. And I'm chair at that point. And I'm looking at 8 people. And nobody said anything. So I looked at the maker of the motion and I said, you know, I am not detecting a second. Why? Because nobody else wanted to talk about this motion. Don't let one person hijack your meeting. That's called hijacking your meeting. If only one person wants to discuss something, no, it's not, you know, more than one person has to want to talk about it. So would I ever ask for, no. Would I maybe say something if we really have to have that? Yes, because they're just too lazy to say second, maybe. So. Anything else? I Okay, let me go to I'm going to go to my last slide, actually. Just a little reminder. And I put my website on there because via my website, you can email me or you can even call me up if you're really desperate. And I always throw this out and people I think don't believe me. I've only had 2 people take me up on this. And they called me and said, I really need to know what to do. What do I do? So I'm throwing that out at you. It's a get out of jail card. If you have a problem and you don't know what to do, you can email me. Okay. And I've got there are some other websites you could learn more or test your parliamentary knowledge should you be so inclined. Again, I'm going to put one last pitch in for this book, is to make yourself feel better about being on a board and being an officer of a board or a member of a board. Get the little book, Robert's Rules in Brief. Okay. That's all I got.
I am about to share, I think.
I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yeah. Yes.
I'll just stop share.
Okay. And I, in the chat box, am going to share a PDF file that she created for today. And this will also be available on our website. Do you see it there? So you should be able to launch that PDF and have some important information from Miriam regarding our session today. And as I mentioned at the start, this will all be available, the recording and the handouts on our website, St. Croix Valley Foundation's website. But any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to follow one of Miriam's rules, which is starting and ending on time. Anything else? Great.
Yay.
Well, yay. It was so great to see everyone. Some of you are new faces. Some of you are very familiar. If you have any questions about consultants and service, please feel free to email me. Otherwise, we hope to see you at the next session. You should get some details about that very soon.
Angie, can you give us your website?
Yes, it's scvfoundation.org. So that stands for St. Croix Valley. So scvfoundation.org.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. And thanks to our presenter, Miriam.
Thank you.
Thank you all for caring about your organizations, really, truly. Yeah. And stay warm, everybody.
Yeah, stay warm, everyone.
Yeah.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
See you all.
Thank you, Angie.
Yes.
I'm gonna take off.
You're gonna go get some lunch now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
I need
Miriam.
that chocolate.
Yeah, no
All right,
kidding.
see you.
Great to see you. Bye-bye. Thanks again.
You bet.
All right, well, good to see you. I'm gonna end the meeting, but thanks for being here.